Welcome back into 2 on OSU. Ben Hutchens here with my brother Sam Hutchens. Sam, we're in the press box. We spent a lot of time in the press box of Boone Pickens Stadium recently. First, of course, Saturday's game against Central Arkansas, but most recently, Sam, for Mike Gundy's midweek press conference, he talked about the quarterback situation. That's the thing on top of everybody's minds here in Stillwater. Sam, what are your takeaways from what you heard today?
I left this press box for the first time this week, Ben, with more questions than answers. After Oklahoma State, the Cowboys won, right? They knocked off, they completed the thing that ultimately every team hopes to do. Cowboys beat Central Arkansas 27-13. But I think in the bigger picture, the game didn't really clarify a whole lot. To me, there was even more questions spawned from the Cowboys' kind of lackluster performance. And of course, Gunnar Gundy came in late to save the day. Maybe you chalk it up to the run game. Who knows exactly how it'll all fall, but Mike Gundy's had a bit of chance to analyze the tape. And Ben, judging from the press conference today, it sounds like it'll be more the same for the Cowboys in Tempe.
It does. Gundy said, hey, we'll have to see how it shakes out in practice. He wasn't making any decisions on Monday. It certainly sounds like we'll probably see all three guys again next week in Tempe, unless anything crazy goes down in practice. There was an interesting thing I think Gundy said about one of the quarterbacks, Gage Gundy. He was asked by our colleague Gary Niemig here at Sellout, does his fourth quarter heroics, does that have any extra weight in terms of this evaluation? I mean, what does that do, Sam, for him to lead two scoring drives late in the game to put this game away? And Mike said, yeah, I think he did earn some stripes from the guys on the field. That's how you do it. You don't do it in practice necessarily. You earn those stripes in the games. And I think Gunnar definitely had that. Mike mentioned that. I mean, that was incredible to see Gunnar do that. What were your takeaways from watching Garrett Rangel start? Were you maybe surprised to see that? And then Alan Bowman come in next.
I think, Ben, there's a chance if you sat down just like a coach will and analyze how Oklahoma State's three quarterbacks played, you could conceivably come up with a winning argument for all three guys. Garrett Rangel started the game for the Cowboys, which I'd assume means something in the big picture. He trotted out first, and I thought he played pretty well. Had the drive that ended in interception, probably his worst play of the day, kind of tried to roll left and didn't get enough left and got hit, threw up a ball in the air that Central Arkansas picked off. But Rangel was solid. He led a touchdown drive, threw a touchdown pass to Brennan Presley. And I thought Alan Bowman, who many thought had the inside track the whole offseason, he probably got the worst shake of things with he had 3 drops on one drive. I think maybe 4 drops from his receivers overall. That kind of tainted his debut and at least blemished it. But Bowman wasn't spectacular, and Gunnar Gundy, he came in late in the fourth quarter, which is crunch time. So maybe that means something too, that Mike Gundy put Gunnar in when the Cowboys, they needed points. But even Gunnar probably leaves the game the big winner if you can anoint one. But Gunnar got a ton of help from the run game. Ollie Gordon was great. The run game the O-line started opening some holes for Gunnar, which maybe the other two guys didn't have. So I think you can score it however way you want, and pretty much it's a split decision. And that's what Mike Gundy leans to in Tempe. I could see it being the same amount of guys in the same order in Tempe, with Rangel starting, Bowman and Gundy in the mop-up. But it'll be interesting, Ben. Do you see it shaking out any differently on Saturday than it did against Central Arkansas?
Well, I was wrong this Saturday, so maybe I'm not the guy to ask. But I do think we'll probably at some point see all three guys. Sam, I wouldn't be surprised if the order has changed. I'd be interested to see. I think just throwing something out 6 days ahead, I think probably Rangel starts. Maybe Gunnar comes in second, and then Bowman could clean up. That's my 6-day prediction. We see it on the weather, how much those 6-game predictions change, those 6-day predictions. So that's just my guess. One thing I thought Mike Gundy said today that was really interesting, Sam. He said, if you combine all three quarterbacks, it was a decent stat line. Like if you pretend all of those stat lines were one guy, what would that look like? Well, I'll tell you, it would have been 30 for 48 for 304 yards, one touchdown, one interception. That's the entire picture. If it were one guy, if we want to break it up, of course, Garrett Rangel started. Sam, he went 10 for 15 for 118 yards, one pick, one interception. Alan Bowman came in next. He went 13 for 24 for 80 yards. And then Gunner cleaned up with 7 completions, 9 attempts, and 106 yards. So I don't think Mike was wrong when he said everybody played well. Nobody played bad. Everybody was all right, well, good, however you want to put it. And I agree. I think I have more questions now than I did at this time
I'll
last week.
push back on that a little bit. If you combine all three stat lines, I look at the points, and I was not impressed bird's eye view with I guess any of the quarterbacks, especially the Cowboys. They scored 27 points, and the offense struggled throughout a lot of the game. It's Central Arkansas, the Central Arkansas, the Bears. This might not be super fair either, but they gave up 59 points to Ole Miss last year in the preseason. I think a lot of people were expecting a name your score type game for the Cowboys, where the Cowboys put up 27 in the first half. And ultimately, sure, you can point to the offensive line, you can point to those struggles, the lack of run game, which is probably a concern for the Cowboys, quite honestly. But they were down a couple linemen. But I think ultimately it does circle back to the quarterbacks a little bit. And sure, the stats were all right, maybe against a Big 12 team, but against Central Arkansas, I don't know. None of the three quarterbacks rose up and took the job, which I think Gundy would have ultimately have loved to happen. One guy comes in, balls out, and that's your guy. But and I guess I'm maybe more pessimistic on you than you on the whole quarterback situation. None of the three guys was great enough to warrant 4 quarters in Tempe.
No, I hear you on that. Nothing inspiring. Nothing. I mean, it was an inspiring last quarter from Gunnar Gundy. His first drive looked a little shaky. Mike, I think, even said he was perhaps a bit nervous, and we could definitely see that. But I didn't walk out of the press box feeling inspired, feeling like this team has an answer. I think they're still searching for it. I mean, Mike Gundy said today, Sam, that he didn't even really know what he was doing until last Thursday. It's all new to him too. So I don't know. I think he's being honest when he says he doesn't know, which is certainly different. I mean, just to hear a coach say, "Hey, I don't know," and I think I actually believe him.
I think the most interesting nugget that we got today from Gundy on the whole quarterback situation is it was a pretty honest admission. He said, with 3 guys who are pretty close, Gundy said, I kind of feel the need to play all of them just in case the transfer portal comes calling. If one guy hasn't risen up and clearly done enough for the job, Gundy kind of said, I feel like I need to play all 3 just so they don't leave me or they feel like they're being fed. And in this day and age, that is a reality that coaches have to deal with at every position, but especially quarterback, where that's why the Cowboys, they need someone to rise up. And maybe it's in Tempe, maybe it's South Alabama, but I don't think you want to go too much further in this season if you're the Cowboys playing 2 quarterbacks, playing 3 quarterbacks. I think you need to settle on a guy as the season winds along pretty quickly.
Are there any other quarterback thoughts you have, Sam? I'm sure as we continue to break down the game, we'll circle back to some of it.
Yeah, real quick. That Deshaun Stribling connection with Garrett Rangel was, I thought, quite notable. And we'll talk with Stribling later today in player availability. So I'm sure by the time our listeners listen to this, there will be content out on that. But that's something I really noticed. Rangel, the starter, was looking for Stribling early and often. And I think he hit him for 3 catches early. And I was impressed with Stribling. I feel like Bowman and Gundy didn't target him near as much, and Stribling, he had his best quarter when Rangel was in the game in that first quarter. But I thought Stribling looked the part of a solid wide receiver, especially when Rangel was throwing it to him.
No doubt. How about this defense, Sam? Of course, it is Bryan Nardo's debut, overshadowed a lot by what we just talked about with the whole quarterback situation. But still, no small storyline with how Nardo did. Of course, they gave up, 23 or 13 points. Um, how did it look? Were you impressed? The three-man front, everything that we've heard about and talked about leading up to this point.
Not really. I wrote post game. It's hard to argue with a scoreboard, and 13 points. That's a win for Nardo, and 13 points with the new defense. That's that was a good end result, but it could have been a lot worse. I think UCA had two early touchdowns taken off the field or taken off the board from flags, and that first one, ineligible man downfield, it had nothing to do with the play. The Cowboys simply got gouged. And then Corey Black is kind of the player that the defense should be thanking the most. Took 6 points off the board right there, and then the Cowboys blocked an extra point. So you had a touchdown worth of points taken off the board just from special teams miscues from the Bears. So I thought there were holes in the defense in the flat, especially. It looked like the Cowboys had trouble ranging out there, and I thought the Bears found some room for on swing passes and kind of screen passes to get out in the flat. Maybe that's something that just comes with the first game, and seeing it on tape, the Cowboys will help adjust to that. But um, that was my thing schematically, but also been tackling. Tackling was suspect, and I think that was the takeaway that a lot of fans had watching on TV.
Especially on the first drive. Bryan Nardo, OSU defensive coordinator, talked about it after the game. Um, I mean, it's tough to get out there and tackle and bring guys to the ground when you haven't really been doing a whole lot of that this offseason. We kind of learned today that's something Mike Gundy leaned into. He said, this offseason in the lead up, fall camp wasn't as much hitting, wasn't as much physicality, perhaps because of all those injuries that the team suffered ahead of last season. So that's the adjustment the Cowboys made. And maybe, hey, like it looks like they're healthier going into the season, but the trade off is what we saw on the first drive with UCA going right down the field, breaking tackles, and scoring two touchdowns that were, fortunately for the Cowboys, called back really not on their own merit. It was a missed block where an offensive lineman ended up 5 yards downfield accidentally, and then a unforced block in the back. So it's not like the Cowboys did anything to really keep UCA out of the end zone there. The Bears just shot themselves in the foot. But I agree, tackling was a bit of an issue.
And the Cowboys are losing a pretty sure tackler, right? With Justin Wright, kind of announced on Twitter last night, God is good. I thought I was going to be out for the year, and now it turns out I'll be back by week 5. And I asked Mike Gundy about that today, and he said that he hadn't gotten a timeline yet, but Mike Gundy himself said that he had thought it was a worse injury for Wright Saturday night too, and then Sunday he got good news of, hey, Wright could be back. So week 5 right now lines up with the Kansas State game that I think a lot of Cowboy fans are circling as, hey, that'll be the first game that you're welcoming in a really solid team in Kansas State right there. But the Cowboys are going to be down a linebacker for the future. It turns out it was a knee injury for Justin Wright, and he got injured in the first half there. So that's why he didn't play a ton. It was kind of an under the radar injury right there. But he'll be back. But the Cowboys will have some patching up to do in these next 4 games to get prepared for week 5.
Yeah, Bryan Nardo, he he said he was asked, hey, like, is there anything you feel like you need to address, anything like that? And he said, yeah, 7,000 of them, which I think illustrates that he's not satisfied with the scoreboard saying 13 points. Like I think the scoreboard looked a lot better than the defense actually was. Like you
Yeah,
said,
that's
Sam,
well
with
said.
those touchdowns called back, 2 field goals blocked, 1 extra point block. Um, that's 7 points right there. That's another touchdown that the Bears didn't get, um, and it would have been a completely different game, Sam. I think um, if those kicks had been made, and instead of a one-score lead late in the third quarter, it was maybe a tie ball game. Would that have changed anything with Gunnar Gundy's mindset entering this game? I thought OSU fans. I mean, it could have been a dark place without some of those amazing special teams plays and fortunate breaks that frankly don't think the Cowboys can count on all season. Just unrealistic.
Yep. That whole the key moment of the game, you can maybe point to a couple, but this is the one I firmly believe was after Gunnar Gundy went 3 and out, the Cowboys got to stop, and Gunnar Gundy came right back on the field for the next possession. And to me, that was telling of a couple things. But the first one is the Mike Gundy firmly believes the QB battle to be a 3-way battle right now. And it turned out he was justified in that. Gunnar Gundy ended up playing well enough to get the Cowboys the win. But when Gundy later he revealed, yeah, that was the plan. Play the quarterbacks in thirds. And that to me revealed the Cowboys believe in that plan and they're willing to stick to it. So I don't think that any of the quarterbacks did enough to win any more playing time in the future. But yeah, Ben, when Gunnar came out again, the Cowboys could have been down. Honestly, I think that's how the score broke. If UCA gets those 7 points, and it could have gone differently. But the Cowboys avoided the fate of 4 other Big 12 teams and avoid losing.
Sam, one thing you have a bit of a pulse on that I want to ask you is who the fans, whose side are they on in this 3-way battle? What are they thinking about this? I know just from sitting up here in the press box, remember after Gunnar Gundy's first drive, I think it went 3 and out. Either way, it wasn't pretty. And I think there was some boos. I mean, that was the first time it really felt, whoa, like these fans were not happy with whatever that was. And
remember,
up here,
starting the game, remember, Rangel trotted out, not a ton of applause. And then when Bowman came out, that was the loudest roar of the day for the quarterbacks, I think. So I think the fans kind of expected Bowman, and I think every fan wanted Bowman to go out and go 15 for 18 with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns and light the Bears up. But because of drops and because of, he didn't do that anyway in the throws that weren't dropped, that didn't happen. But yeah, I put out a poll on Twitter and it got a ton of votes. So people are very invested in this type of thing. As Garth Brooks was playing and as the fourth quarter was starting, I put out a poll: who do OK State fans want to start? And Gunnar Gundy initially polled somewhere around 10 or 15%. He was by far, most people I think had Rangel, and then there's a contingent of fans that wanted Bowman to come out for the fourth quarter. But Gunnar was by far the least popular option. And then he comes out and leads 2 touchdown drives. And by the end of it, I think he finished with 45% of the votes. So he was the leading vote getter. So I saw how those 2 drives certainly impacted the fans' pulse. And as Gundy said, amongst the team, those 2 drives earned Gunnar some stripes. They had to have. So I think you could still find fans that support each of the 3 candidates, right? I don't think there's a consensus, and I think that you could find somebody who supports Bowman, Rangel, and Gundy, but it's all about who the coaches support. And I asked Casey Dunn after the game, did tonight make things clearer or muddier for you? And he didn't give me a super straight answer. He just said, that's for me and the boss man to figure out in his corner office. So there's still a lot of figuring out, no doubt.
Agreed. I think fans are still figuring out who they want to see. This team still has a lot to figure out, as evidenced by, not that dominant of a win against the University of Central Arkansas, especially when reflecting over on what happened in Norman. Like that's kind of the playbook for how these opening games should go. But the Cowboys, it did not go that way. And I think there are some reasons why and some reasons that the Cowboys need to get fixed, especially before heading into Tempe next week and then South Alabama the week after. Sam, did you have any final thoughts or anything you need to get off your chest?
Well, it's worth pointing out that I felt pretty similar about this team right now after week 1 that I did the Cowboys team that won the Fiesta Bowl that really struggled against Missouri State. And Missouri State, I think Jason Shelley was the quarterback that had Missouri State in 2021 driving to tie the game, probably go for 2, and take that opening game in Stillwater from the Cowboys in 2021. Obviously, like the Cowboys defense that turned out to be really, really freaking good that year got a stop. But it's worth pointing out that the Cowboys have really struggled against an inferior opponent in week one and then, gone on to win a Fiesta Bowl or whatever. But that's, I don't know if that's necessarily in the cards this year. I think the Cowboys need to figure out a lot to start looking like that 2021 team. And that 2021 team, they did have a quarterback. That was they had a true number one guy there. So this team is not there yet. So it'll be Tempe will be fascinating. Cowboys play Arizona State, only a 3-point favorite. So it maybe it'll look more like the Central Arkansas State game where it's a tight game late, and I'll be fascinated by how that game plays out.
And we'll both be there in Arizona, of course, for Sellout Crowd and HutchensTwins.com, covering all things Oklahoma State Cowboys. Thanks for joining us on this podcast. Thanks for reading our stories last week as Sellout Crowd launched and debuted. We appreciate the support. So keep doing it. You know where we'll be all season long, right back in this press box covering the Cowboys.